My name is Vexral Tanaris, and I am writing this log because I believe I have only minutes left to live. The bridge around me is shaking so hard that my tactical screen has cracked across the middle. Smoke is pouring from the ceiling vents, and the air smells like burning copper. I can hear my crew shouting over the alarms, but the words sound far away, like voices coming from the bottom of a deep well. We are losing badly. I'm the fleet coordinator for the Galactic Concord 7th Defense Armada. That title used to mean something. Today it means I am the one who has to watch our ships die, one by one, while I sit in a chair I cannot leave. We have 43 warships from 12 different species, all gathered here to defend the jump nexus at Kepler's Reach. Behind us are 17 civilian worlds, full of families, schools, hospitals, and people who have no idea how close they are to losing everything. In front of us is the Vorn hegemony, crystal beings who think with one shared mind across hundreds of ships. They outnumber us 3 to 1. Their weapons cut through our shields like the shields are not even there. They have already broken our left flank, and now they are working on our right. My second in command, an officer named Kellys, leans toward me with blood running from a cut above his eye. "Coordinator," he says, trying to keep his voice steady, "the Drenari battleship just lost main power. They are asking permission to evacuate." "Granted," I say. My voice comes out flat. I do not feel anything when I say it. I think I have used up all my feelings already. Another impact rocks the ship. Sparks shower down from the upper deck. A young officer near the navigation console, a Kothari female named Veshi, is crying silent tears. Her people believe that tears at the end mean a soul is ready to leave the body with dignity. I look away from her because I cannot bear it. I open my personal log and start recording. I want my words to survive even if I do not. "This is Vexral Tanaris," I say. "If anyone finds this recording, please understand that we did our best. We came here to protect the inner colonies. We knew the odds. We accepted them. The Concord has been a beautiful idea for 10,000 cycles. 12 species working together in peace, sharing trade, sharing knowledge, sharing hope. I do not regret being part of it. I only regret that we could not save more lives today." I pause. I take a breath that tastes like smoke. There is one more thing I should mention for the historical record. Our newest member species, the humans, promised to send help. They promised one warship. One, against an entire Vorn armada. I voted against admitting them to the Concord 11 cycles ago. I thought they were too strange, too young, too unpredictable. Today their absence proves I was right. They are not coming, or if they are, it will not matter. I close my eyes. I think about my mate waiting at home on Threxlin Prime. I think about our 2 children who will grow up without their father. Then Kelly speaks again and his voice has changed. It is sharper now, confused. "Coordinator, we have a new contact. Slipspace exit at the edge of the system." I open my eyes. Vorn reinforcements. "No, sir, the signature is wrong. It does not match anything in our database." For a moment I let myself hope. Then I crush the feeling because hope is dangerous when you are about to die. Identify it. Veshi works her console with shaking hands. The image on the main screen flickers, breaks apart, then comes back together. And there it is. A single ship. It is large, but not as large as a Vorn dreadnought. It is shaped wrong. Conquered ships are smooth, curved, designed to look graceful in the void. This vessel is angular and sharp, painted in a dull black color that seems to swallow the light from nearby stars. There are markings along its hull in symbols I do not recognize, written in many different scripts as if many cultures had each left their signature. It is the human warship, the one they promised, the only one. Kelly stares at the screen. That is their entire contribution, one ship. I do not answer. I am too busy reading the sensor data scrolling down my display, and the more I read, the less sense it makes. "Coordinator," Veshi says quietly, "the energy readings from this vessel exceed our measurement scale. Our systems cannot calculate them properly. And there is something else." "What?" It is carrying over 4,000 crew members. I turn to look at her. That is impossible. A ship that size in our fleet would carry 600 at most. Why would they put so many bodies on one vessel? She does not have an answer. The human ship begins moving toward our position at a speed that should not be possible without breaking apart. My communications officer, a quiet Brennikai named Pollen, suddenly raises a webbed hand. "Sir, they are hailing us." "Put it through." The view screen splits, and I find myself looking at a human face for the first time in a real combat situation. She is a female, with dark skin and short black hair, wearing a uniform with various small symbols pinned to her chest. Her name, according to the translation system, is Captain Helen Brooks. She is calm, not just calm but relaxed. Behind her I can see her bridge crew moving with quiet purpose. One of them, a young man with red hair, actually smiles at the camera and gives a small wave. I do not understand what I am seeing. "Coordinator Tanaris," Captain Brooks says. Her voice is warm and steady. "Sorry we are late. Tell me where you need us." I open my mouth to respond, but no sound comes out. How do I explain to her that we are already broken? That her one ship cannot turn this around? That the kindest thing she can do is turn around and run before the Vorn notice her? A massive impact rocks our ship. The lights flicker. Veshy screams as her console shorts out and throws sparks across her face. Kelly's grabs the railing to keep from falling. Captain Brooks does not even flinch on the screen. She just waits. "Captain," I finally manage to say, "you do not understand the situation. The Vorn have us surrounded. Their flagship is preparing its main weapon. We have less than 2 minutes before the next strike. You should withdraw, save yourselves." She tilts her head slightly, like she is studying me. Then she asks me a question I will remember for the rest of my life. "Coordinator, will you give me tactical command of this engagement for 4 minutes?" The bridge goes completely silent. Every officer turns to look at me. Concord Protocol does not allow this. Tactical command can only be transferred between full member species, and humans are still on probation. Giving her control would break a dozen regulations. It could end my career. It could brand me a traitor in the official records. But my career is already ending. My ship is dying. My crew is dying. The 17 worlds behind us are about to die. 4 minutes. I look at Captain Brooks on the screen. She is not smiling. She is not pleading. She is just waiting with the patience of someone who has stood at the edge of disaster many times before. "Coordinator," Kelly's whispers, "you cannot." "I can," I say, "and I will." I straighten in my chair. I make my voice firm. "Captain Brooks, I grant you tactical command of this engagement for 4 minutes. The conquered fleet will follow your orders. May whatever you do bring us all home." For the first time she smiles. It is a small smile, but it changes her whole face. It is not a smile of joy. It is something else. Something I do not have a word for in my own language. The closest I can come is the look a hunter gets when it finally has its prey within reach. "Thank you, Coordinator," she says. "Pull all your remaining ships back to the second defensive line. Do not engage. Just watch." "Watch what?" She turns to her own crew and gives an order I cannot hear. Then she looks back at me, and 4 words come out of her mouth. 4 words I will hear in my dreams every night for the rest of my life. "Watch what we do." The channel cuts. On my screen, the human warship suddenly accelerates. Not toward our position, where it would be safe behind our remaining ships. Not away, toward the jump point where it could escape. It accelerates straight at the Vorn flagship. A single warship, charging at the heart of an armada. Kelly's whispers something in his native tongue. I think it might be a prayer. I order the fleet to fall back as instructed. Our ships disengage and limp toward the second defensive line. The Vorn do not pursue immediately, because their attention has just been caught by something very strange. A small dark vessel is racing toward them at a speed their sensors are struggling to track. I should be afraid. I should be preparing for the end. Instead, I find that I am leaning forward in my seat, watching the screen with my breath caught in my chest. Veshi has stopped crying. She is also watching. The whole bridge is watching. The human ship is now within weapons range of the Vorn screening cruisers. It does not slow down. It does not change course. It just keeps coming like a knife thrown by a steady hand. The Vorn flagship begins to charge its main lance. I can see the energy building on the sensor display, a pulse of light that grows brighter with every second. In about 90 seconds, it will release a beam capable of destroying any ship in our fleet in a single strike. 80 seconds. 70 seconds. The human ship is still flying directly at it. What is she doing? What kind of plan involves flying alone into the path of a weapon that can split a battleship in half? 60 seconds. Kelly's grips the railing so hard his knuckles turn white. "Coordinator," he says, "I think we are about to witness something." I do not answer. I cannot answer. My throat has closed up. 50 seconds. The human ship's hull begins to glow, not with damage, with something else, something I have never seen before, a soft blue light that rolls along its surface like water flowing over stone. 40 seconds. Veshi gasps, "Sir, the human ship is launching something." I look at the screen. Small objects are pouring from the sides of the vessel like seeds being scattered from a hand. Hundreds of them, maybe more. "What are they?" I ask. She studies her readings. "I do not know. They are too small to be ships, too coordinated to be debris. They are moving as one, like a single living creature spread across many bodies." 30 seconds. The small objects flood toward the Vorn fleet. They move with impossible coordination, splitting and joining and splitting again, weaving between the enemy cruisers like a flock of strange birds. 20 seconds. The Vorn flagship's main weapon is almost ready to fire. I can see the targeting beam already locked onto our retreating fleet. In a moment, that beam will become death for thousands of our people. 10 seconds. Captain Helen Brooks's voice comes through one final time on a private channel, soft and clear, speaking only to me. "Coordinator, you might want to record this part. Your historians are going to want it." The transmission ends, and the 4 minutes begin. The first second of those 4 minutes is when I learned that I had spent my entire life misunderstanding what war could be. The small objects that the human ship had launched, the ones we did not yet have a word for, did not strike the Vorn flagship. They did not strike anything at first. Instead, they swarmed across the Vorn screening cruisers and attached themselves to the sensor arrays. Hundreds of small dark shapes, latching on like insects landing on the back of a much larger animal. For one full second, nothing happened. Then every Vorn cruiser in the front line went blind at the same moment. I watched it happen on my tactical display. The clean, organized formation of the Vorn fleet, all linked together by their shared crystal mind, suddenly developed a hole in the middle. The cruisers were still there, still functioning, but their eyes had been removed. They could no longer see. And because the Vorn collective mind shared sight across all its ships, the blindness spread like a sickness through their formation. The whole Vorn armada hesitated, just for a moment, just for one heartbeat. That heartbeat was all Captain Brooks needed. Her ship, which had been charging straight at the flagship, suddenly cut its engines and rotated. Not turned, rotated. Spun in place faster than any ship its size should be able to move, until its main weapon was pointing directly at the Vorn flagship's command section. Then it fired. I do not know how to describe what came out of that gun. It was not a beam of light. It was not a solid shell. It was not a missile. The closest I can come is to say it looked like a hole in space itself, a shaped emptiness, traveling at speeds the eye could not follow. The front third of the Vorn flagship simply stopped existing. There was no fire, no debris flying outward. The metal and crystal and material that had been there a moment before were just gone, as if reality itself had taken a clean bite out of the ship. Kelly's made a sound next to me. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when their understanding of the universe has just been adjusted in a violent and permanent way. On the tactical display, the Vorn collective mind reacted. The remaining ships in their armada all turned at once, like a school of fish responding to a shadow in the water. They had registered the threat. They were now pivoting to respond with overwhelming force. 3 Vorn dreadnoughts began charging their own main weapons. 6 battlecruisers locked their targeting systems on the human ship. Dozens of smaller vessels surged forward to box it in. The human ship was about to be surrounded by enemies on every side. Captain Brooks did not run. She did something I did not think was possible. The human ship's hull lit up again with that strange blue glow. The space around it began to bend, the stars behind it warping into curved lines. And then, in the middle of the battle, the ship performed a slip-space jump. A short jump, an impossibly short jump. Our science officers had told me for years that you could not perform a slip-space jump within a star system. The mathematics did not allow it. The forces involved would tear any ship apart at the molecular level. It was a hard rule of physics. It was simply not possible. The human ship did it anyway. It vanished from one position and reappeared 2 seconds later behind the Vorn rear guard, just like that, as if it had stepped through a door that nobody else could see. The Vorn formation, which had been turning to face the threat in front of them, now had a threat directly behind them. Their collective mind, already confused by the blinded cruisers, struggled to reorient. The dreadnoughts that had been charging their main weapons now had to reverse their angles. The battle cruisers that had been moving forward now had to stop and turn around. In the time it took them to do this, the human ship moved again. This time it did not jump. It simply accelerated through the rear of the Vorn formation at a speed that left a trail of distortion in the void behind it. As it passed each enemy ship, its weapons fired. Not the void weapon this time, something different. Quick, precise pulses of energy that punched through specific points on each Vorn vessel. The shots were not random, they were surgical. Each one targeted a specific system: engines, communications, weapons control, sensors. The human gunners knew exactly where to hit each Vorn ship to disable it without destroying it. They were taking the enemy fleet apart piece by piece, like a craftsman dismantling a machine he wanted to study later. Within 30 seconds, the entire Vorn rearguard was floating helpless. Their ships still had hulls and crew and lights, but they could not move, could not shoot, and could not communicate. They were simply removed from the battle without being broken in half. Veshi, the young Kothari officer, whispered something I did not catch. I asked her to repeat it. "This is not war," she said. "This is something else. I do not know what to call it." I did not know either. Captain Brooks's ship continued its sweep. It moved through the Vorn formation like a needle moving through cloth, threading between enemy vessels with millimeters to spare, firing in every direction at once. I watched the sensor data and realized that the human ship had multiple weapon systems all operating independently. Different parts of the hull were firing at different targets at the same time. The ship was attacking like an animal with many limbs, each one acting on its own, but all of them coordinated by a single intelligence. How were they doing this? How could a single ship coordinate so many actions at once? Then I understood. The 4,000 crew. That was why they carried so many bodies. Each weapon system, each sensor cluster, each defensive system had its own dedicated team of operators. They were not relying on automation alone. They had real living beings handling each task in real time, all communicating with each other through systems we did not understand. The Vorn collective mind was facing something it had no answer for. Its strength had always been the unity of its many ships under one consciousness, but now it was facing a single ship with many consciousnesses, all working together. The opposite of its own nature, a mirror image. And the mirror was winning. 2 minutes had passed. The Vorn flagship, what was left of it, tried to retreat. Its remaining engines fired, pushing the broken vessel back toward the jump point. Captain Brooks let it go. She did not pursue. She did not finish it off. Instead, she turned her attention to the second wave of Vorn ships that had been holding position behind the front line. Palan, my communications officer, suddenly raised a webbed hand. Coordinator, the human ship is hailing the enemy. Hailing them. On open channels, broadcasting to the entire Vorn fleet. I leaned forward, put it on the bridge speakers. Captain Brooks's voice came through, calm and clear, speaking in the Vorn language. I had not realized humans even had translation systems for the Vorn collective tongue. The translation systems we used in the Concord had taken decades to develop. Vorn hegemony forces, she said. This engagement is over. Your flagship is broken. Your rear guard is disabled. Your forward cruisers are blind. You have two choices. Withdraw your remaining vessels to the jump point and leave this system, or remain and lose the rest of your fleet. I am giving you 60 seconds to decide. There was silence on the channel. The Vorn collective mind did not negotiate. It did not surrender. It did not retreat. These were facts every species in the Concord knew. The Vorn always fought to the last ship. They considered any retreat a kind of death worse than actual death, because it broke the unity of their shared mind. For 60 seconds, the channel stayed silent. Then slowly, the surviving Vorn ships began turning toward the jump point. I had to grip the arms of my command chair to keep from falling out of it. The Vorn were retreating. The Vorn never retreated. In 10,000 cycles of recorded history, no conquered force had ever made a Vorn fleet break off an attack. This human captain had done it in 3 minutes. The remaining Vorn cruisers and battleships limped toward the jump point. Some of them were heavily damaged. Others were untouched but no longer interested in continuing the fight. Their collective mind had calculated somehow that staying meant losing everything, and that some retreat was better than none. It was a calculation no Vorn fleet had ever made before. Captain Brooks watched them go. She did not fire on the retreating ships. She gave them safe passage. She even ordered her own small machines, the swarm that had blinded the cruisers earlier, to release their grip and return to her ship. As the Vorn cruisers regained their sight, she allowed them to navigate to the jump point without interference. This was perhaps the strangest thing of all. She was letting them live. She had broken their armada, but she was sending the survivors home. 3 minutes and 41 seconds after the 4 minutes began, the last Vorn ship entered the jump point and disappeared. The battle was over. My bridge was completely silent. No alarms, no shouting, no impacts, just the soft hum of my ship's life support systems, which somehow had not been damaged enough to fail. We had survived. The fleet had survived. The 17 civilian worlds behind us had survived. I looked at my tactical display. 41 of our 43 warships were still there, although many were heavily damaged. 2 had been lost during the early part of the battle before the human ship had arrived. Their crews had escaped in life pods, which were now drifting in the void waiting for rescue. The human ship, the one ship, had not taken a single significant impact in the entire engagement. I sat in my command chair and tried to process what I had just witnessed. My hands were shaking. I had not noticed until now. Captain Brooks's face appeared on my main view screen again. She looked exactly the same as she had 4 minutes ago, calm, steady. A small line of sweat on her brow was the only sign that she had been working hard. "Coordinator Tanaris," she said, "the engagement is concluded. I am returning tactical command to you. Your fleet is yours again." I tried to speak. My voice would not come. She waited patiently. Finally, I managed to find my words. "Captain Brooks, what did I just see?" She thought about her answer for a long moment. Then she said something that I have never forgotten. "Coordinator, you saw a single warship doing its job. We came when you called. We did what was needed. Now we are here to help with the rescue work. Where would you like us to start?" That was it. That was her whole answer. As if what she had just done was not extraordinary. As if breaking a Vorn armada in less than 4 minutes was simply a normal day's work for her. I gave her instructions for the rescue operation. Her ship moved gracefully through the wreckage, gathering up our life pods, transporting wounded crew members to her own medical bays, helping to repair our most damaged vessels. Her crew worked with quiet efficiency. They did not boast. They did not celebrate. They simply did the work that needed doing. Kelly's came over to stand beside my command chair. He was very pale. His hands, like mine, were shaking. "Coordinator," he said quietly, "what are we going to do?" "About what?" "About them." I knew what he meant. He meant that everything had just changed. The Concord had spent 100,000 cycles building itself on the assumption that we, the cooperative species, would inherit the stars together. We had assumed that our peaceful cooperation made us strong. We had assumed that any threat could be answered by combined effort. We had just watched one ship, from a probationary species we barely knew, do something none of our combined fleets could have done. The implications were enormous. They were also terrifying. "I do not know," I told Kellys. "I really do not know." I looked at the human ship on my view screen, moving among our wounded vessels like a healer, gentle and careful. I watched its small craft, the same swarm that had blinded the Vorn just minutes before, now flying life pods to safety with infinite care. The same hands that could destroy could also heal. The same minds that could plan a perfect attack could also plan a perfect rescue. I realized, sitting there in my battered command chair, that I needed to go aboard that ship. I needed to meet Captain Brooks face to face. I needed to understand what I had just seen, and what it meant for the future of the Concord, and the future of every species that called the galaxy home. I needed to ask the humans the question that was burning in my chest. I needed to ask them how. How does a young species, barely out of its homeworld, build something like this? How do they fight like this? How do they think like this? And more importantly, how many more of them are there? I requested permission to come aboard. Captain Brooks granted it immediately, with the same calm courtesy she had shown throughout the engagement. As my shuttle prepared to launch from our hangar bay, Kellys touched my arm. "Be careful, Coordinator," he said. "We do not know what they really are." "No," I agreed, "we do not." But I was going to find out. Before I boarded my shuttle, I took one more look at my tactical display. The aftermath of the battle stretched across the screen like a strange painting. Pieces of broken Vorn ships drifted in slow patterns. Life pods from our own fleet blinked steadily as the human craft gathered them in. Far in the distance, the 17 civilian worlds we had been protecting continued their orbits, their populations completely unaware that they had come within minutes of a terrible end. Veshi, the young Kilthari officer, was now standing at her post with her tears dried. She caught my eye as I walked past her console. "Coordinator," she said softly, "may I ask you something?" "Yes." "When you go aboard their ship, when you speak with them, will you ask them why they came at all? We are still new to them. They owe us nothing." It was a good question, a question I had not yet thought to ask. The humans had been Concord members for only 11 cycles. We had not been particularly welcoming during that time. Many member species, including my own, had treated them with quiet suspicion. We had given them limited trade access. We had restricted their travel to certain regions. We had voted against their proposals more often than not. And yet, when we called for help, they had come. Not with token assistance, but with everything they apparently had on hand. "Yes," I told Veshi, "I will ask." I walked to the shuttle bay. My ship was still venting smoke from a dozen broken systems, but the engineering crews were already at work patching the worst damage. The mood among the crew was strange. They were not celebrating. They were not even relieved, exactly. They were quiet in the way that people are quiet when they have witnessed something they cannot fully understand. A Brennikai engineer, working on a damaged conduit, looked up as I passed. He raised a webbed hand in a gesture of respect, but his eyes were full of questions. He had seen what I had seen. He was now wondering, like everyone else, what it meant. What did it mean for our future, if a single ship from a young species could do what no fleet from any old species had ever managed? What did it mean for the balance of power that had kept the conquered stable for so many cycles? What did it mean for the small worlds and quiet trade routes and gentle agreements that made up our shared way of life? I did not know, but I suspected that the answers were waiting for me on the human ship. The shuttle bay doors hissed open as I approached. My pilot, a young officer named Tren, was already in the cockpit running through the launch sequence. He looked nervous. I did not blame him. He was about to fly his coordinator across the void to a ship that had just performed feats his instructors had told him were impossible. "Coordinator," he said as I strapped into the seat behind him, "are you sure about this?" "No," I said honestly, "but I am going anyway." He nodded. He understood. Sometimes the only way to face a thing you cannot understand is to walk straight toward it. The shuttle lifted off, slipped through the bay shielding, and began its journey across the empty space between our wounded fleet and the strange, dark vessel that had saved us all. I pressed my face close to the viewport and watched the human ship grow larger as we approached. From this close, I could see details I had missed before. There were small scars along its hull, the marks of past engagements. There were tiny lights blinking in patterns I did not recognize, perhaps some kind of running signal between sections of the vessel. There were observation domes where I could just make out the silhouettes of crew members watching the void outside. Some of them were watching my shuttle approach. One of them, I am almost certain, waved at me. The shuttle began its docking procedure. The human bay doors opened, revealing a brightly lit interior that looked nothing like the hangars on our conquered ships. There was equipment everywhere, organized in ways I did not understand. Crew members in various uniforms moved with purpose. A young human male stood near the docking platform, holding what appeared to be a welcome sign written in my own native script. He had clearly worked hard on it. Some of the letters were slightly wrong, but the meaning was clear. He was welcoming me aboard. I had come expecting to find soldiers. I was finding hosts. The shuttle settled onto the docking platform. The bay doors closed behind us. The atmosphere equalized. Whatever the humans were, whatever they really were under the surface, I was about to find out. I stepped off the shuttle and onto a ship that, 4 minutes earlier, had rewritten everything I thought I knew about the universe. The young man with the welcome sign smiled and bowed. "Coordinator Tanaris," he said in passable Threxlan, "welcome aboard. The captain is waiting for you." I followed the young man through the corridors of the human warship, and what I saw on that walk shook me as much as the battle itself had. His name, he told me, was Daniel. He was 19 Earth years old, which by human counting made him barely an adult. He had been on this ship for 2 years. He spoke 5 languages, including 3 conquered tongues, and he was studying a 4th. He apologized for his accent in Threxlan, although it was already better than most translation systems. The corridor we walked through was nothing like a conquered warship. Conquered vessels are sleek and minimal, designed to look serious and efficient. The walls of this ship were covered in art. Some of it was painted directly onto the metal. Some of it was hung in frames. There were photographs of crew members and their families. There were drawings made by children, taped up at child height, signed in big, careful letters with names like Tommy and Lily and Oliver. There were paintings of places I did not recognize, places that must be on the human homeworld. We passed an open doorway and I saw what appeared to be a classroom. Small human children sat in a circle while an older woman read to them from a book. They looked up as we walked past. One of them, a little girl with curly brown hair, waved at me. I did not know how to respond. I lifted one of my hands awkwardly. She giggled and went back to listening. "There are children on this ship," I said. Daniel nodded. "About 200 of them plus their teachers. Almost every adult on board has family with them. spouses, parents, siblings, children. We do not separate our military families during long deployments. The captain says it would break us. I tried to understand this. On a conquered warship, families would never be allowed. The risks were too great. The presence of non-combatants would compromise tactical decisions. It made no sense. And yet, this ship had just performed the most decisive military action I had ever witnessed. We passed a kitchen. Real food was being prepared by real cooks with real ingredients. The smells were strange and unfamiliar but somehow inviting. We passed a recreation area where off-duty crew members were playing some kind of game involving a small ball and wooden sticks. We passed a garden, an actual garden, with plants growing under artificial lights. A human female was tending to the plants, gentle as if the plants were her children. "You grow food on your warship?" I asked. "We grow some of it. The captain says we do better work when we eat real food. The hydroponic bay also produces oxygen and helps with the psychological well-being of the crew. Long missions are hard. Anything we can do to make this place feel like home, we do." I was no longer thinking of this vessel as a warship. I was thinking of it as something else, a traveling town, a community that happened to have weapons. We arrived at a small chamber that Daniel called an observation lounge. It had wide curved windows that looked out into the void. The aftermath of the battle was visible through the windows, with our ship still being assisted by human craft. The room itself was simple. A few comfortable chairs, a low table, a pot of something warm sitting on a small heating plate. Captain Helen Brooks was already there, looking out the window. She turned when I entered. She had taken off her uniform jacket and was now wearing a simple gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up. She looked tired now, in a way she had not looked during the engagement. The calm steadiness was still there, but there was something behind her eyes that I recognized. The weight of decisions made, the weight of lives carried. "Coordinator Tanaris," she said, "thank you for coming. Please sit. May I offer you something to drink? We have water, of course, and a human beverage called tea that some of your species find tolerable." I sat down carefully. The chair was sized for humans, slightly small for me but comfortable. Tea would be acceptable, thank you. She poured something dark from the pot into 2 small cups. The smell was bitter but not unpleasant. She handed me 1 cup, took the other for herself, and sat down across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other across the low table, 2 strangers from 2 species who had just shared the most intense few minutes either of us would probably ever live through. I broke the silence first. "Captain Brooks, I came here with many questions. I do not know which one to ask first." "Take your time. We have as much time as you need." "Then I will start with the most important one. Why did your people come at all? We have not been kind to your species since you joined the conquered. We voted against you. We restricted your trade. We treated you with suspicion. We promised you nothing in return for your help today. And yet you came anyway, and you fought as if your own home worlds were at stake. Why?" She held her cup in both hands and looked into it for a moment before answering. "That is a fair question," she said, "and I will give you an honest answer. We came because 17 civilian worlds were about to lose their populations. That is enough reason for us. We do not need to be liked to do what is right. We do not need to be welcome to help when we are needed. The cost of staying away would have been too high, not for us, but for the people on those worlds. So we came." "That is not a complete answer." She looked up and almost smiled. "No, it is not. There is more. Would you like the rest?" "Yes." She set her cup down. "We came because we know what it is like to be alone in a hostile situation. Our species spent its entire early history alone in the universe, with no allies, no conquered to call on, no cousins among the stars. We faced our own dangers, our own setbacks, our own near extinctions. Several times in our history we came very close to ending. Each time. We survived because we found ways to cooperate, to share, to protect each other. We learned that aloneness is the worst thing in the universe. We learned it the hard way." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. When we joined the Concord 11 cycles ago, we promised ourselves something. We promised that we would never let any other species feel the kind of aloneness we had felt. That promise did not depend on whether the other species liked us. It did not depend on whether they had voted for us. It only depended on whether they needed us. Today, you needed us. So we came. I sat with that answer for a long moment. It was simple. It was almost too simple. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it was also a kind of strength I had not encountered before in any species. The ability to give help without conditions. The ability to act on principle even when the recipient had not earned it. It was uncomfortable to receive that kind of help. It made me feel like I owed something I could not easily repay. "There is something else I must ask," I said. "Go ahead." "Your ship, what I saw it do, the blinding swarms, the shaped void weapon, the slip-space jump within a star system, none of these things should be possible by our science. None of these things appear in any record of any conquered species. How does your young civilization possess weapons and technologies that our oldest civilizations have never even theorized?" This was the question that had been burning in me since the second of those 4 minutes. The question I had carried across the void on my shuttle. The question that everyone in the Concord would soon be asking. Captain Brooks was quiet for a long time. She picked up her cup again, sipped from it, and set it down. "Coordinator Tanaris," she said carefully, "I am going to answer your question, but the answer requires some history. Are you willing to listen to a long explanation?" "Yes." She nodded. "Then I will tell you about Earth, about my homeworld, about what it taught us, and I will try to help you understand why our young civilization, as you put it, has tools that older civilizations do not." She stood up and walked to the window. The aftermath of the battle was still visible outside, although the rescue work was now mostly complete. "Earth," she said, "is what your species would call a death world. The gravity is high, the weather is violent. The plants are full of substances that can cause harm. The animals were larger and faster and stronger than us for almost all of our history. Our nearest cousin species died out about 30,000 years ago, leaving us as the only thinking species on the planet. We were not the strongest species on Earth. We were not the fastest. We were not the most numerous. We were not even the smartest by some measures, but we survived, and we won. Do you know why?" I shook my head. "Because we were the most relentless. Because we cooperated with each other in ways no other species on Earth did. Because we used tools, then better tools, then tools that made other tools. Because we worked together in groups, then bigger groups, then nations, then a single global community. Because we passed our knowledge from one generation to the next, and each generation added to what came before. Because we never ever gave up on each other." She turned to look at me. "For most of our history we were terrified, not of other species because we never met any. We were terrified of our own world, the animals that hunted us, the diseases that came from nowhere, the disasters that wiped out whole settlements, the famines that killed millions. We were terrified of each other too because we have a long history of conflict among ourselves. We learned, slowly and painfully, how to control our own dangers. By the time we had control of our world, we had built tools and ways of thinking that, frankly, were probably more advanced than any species needs to face only natural threats. I was beginning to understand. You overprepared. In a way, yes. By the time we left our home star system, we had spent centuries imagining every possible thing that could be out here in the universe waiting for us. Every disaster, every threat, every possible kind of unfriendly neighbor. Our greatest scientists and engineers were given resources to build tools for problems that did not exist yet. We hoped we would never need most of those tools, but we built them anyway, just in case." She returned to her chair and sat down across from me. "When we finally met other civilizations, we found something we did not expect. We found beautiful, peaceful, cooperative species like yours, who had grown up in gardens compared to our home. Species who had not needed to overprepare. Species who had built lovely, efficient, but limited defenses because they had never faced threats that required more. We loved you immediately. and we decided quietly among ourselves that we would never burden you with our overpreparations. We would hide the worst of our tools. We would join your Concord and try to be good members. We would let you remain in your gardens. But you brought one of those tools today. Yes, because today the garden was on fire, and we have a saying on Earth: the right tool at the right time saves more than 1,000 wrong tools at the wrong time. I sat very still. Outside the window, our wounded fleet was being slowly stitched back together by human craft. Inside, I was being told something that would change the entire shape of the Concord forever. Captain Brooks, this ship, the one that just defeated a Vorn armada in less than 4 minutes, how does it compare to your other ships? She was quiet for a long moment. Coordinator, please understand that I am only telling you this because you have earned the truth today. You trusted us with command of your fleet, which was a courageous choice. You came aboard our ship without escort, which was a generous choice. You deserve honesty in return. Yes. She took a deep breath. This ship is not our best. It is not even close to our best. We sent it because it was the closest one to your distress call when it came in. It is, by our internal classifications, a medium response vessel. We have ships that are larger. We have ships that are faster. We have ships with capabilities I am not authorized to describe. This vessel is what you would call a regular working ship, nothing special by our standards. The cup in my hand had begun to tremble. I set it down before I could spill the contents. How many, I said, how many ships like this do your people have? Coordinator, I am not authorized to give exact numbers, but I can tell you that what you saw today is not unusual for us. We have many ships. We have many crews. We have been preparing for a very long time. Why, what were you preparing for? She looked at me with great gentleness. There was no pride in her face, no threat, only a kind of sadness, as if she wished she did not have to say what she was about to say. For this, for exactly this, for the day when one of our friends would call for help and we would need to answer. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, stars burned steadily in the void. Somewhere in the distance, a damaged ship was being towed by a human tug. 100,000 cycles of conquered history seemed to balance on the silence between us. Captain Brooks, I finally said, the Concord must know this. My government must know. The other governments must know. Yes, she agreed, they must, and we will help you tell them in any way you wish. We are not hiding anymore. Today is the end of our hiding. I picked up my cup again with hands that had finally steadied. The tea was still warm. I took a small sip. It was bitter, but I was beginning to understand the appeal. What happens next? I asked. She smiled finally. It was a small, tired smile. Next, you and I write a report together. And then the galaxy gets a little bit safer and a little bit more honest. That is what happens next. But before we could begin that report, she invited me to walk through more of the ship. She wanted me to see things, she said, that words alone could not convey. I agreed, partly out of duty and partly out of a deep curiosity I could no longer hide. We walked through engineering sections where human technicians worked with calm focus on systems I did not recognize. One older man with gray hair and rolled-up sleeves was singing quietly to himself as he checked a control panel. His voice was rough but pleasant. He nodded to the captain as we passed. She nodded back. There was a familiarity between them that suggested years of working together, of knowing each other's names and families and small daily habits. We walked past a medical bay where wounded crew members from our own fleet were being treated. Brennikai, Threxlin, Kilthari. All of them lying on human medical tables, being cared for by human doctors and nurses. The medical staff had clearly studied our anatomies. They knew which medications worked for which species. They knew how to set Threxlin bones, which is something most conquered medics outside my own species struggle with. They knew how to handle Kilthari respiratory systems, which require special humidity controls. A young human nurse, a woman with a long brown braid, was holding the hand of a very frightened Brennikai engineer who had been pulled from a damaged engine room. She was speaking softly to him in his own language, calming him, distracting him from the pain of his treatment. He clutched her hand like a child clinging to a parent. I stopped to watch them for a moment. "How long," I asked Captain Brooks, "have your people been studying our species in such detail?" "Decades, Coordinator, quietly. Not to find weaknesses, but to learn how to help. We knew eventually that days like today might come. We wanted to be ready not just with weapons, but with everything. Bandages, medications, comforting words. The little things that matter when somebody is afraid." We continued our walk. I saw a chapel of some kind, a small quiet room where crew members of various beliefs could spend a few moments in reflection. I saw a library full of physical books, real paper bound in covers, in dozens of languages. I saw a wall covered in handwritten notes from family members back on Earth, sent through some kind of message system, taped up so the crew could read them between shifts. I began to understand something about the humans that I had not fully grasped before. They did not separate their lives from their work. They did not separate their gentleness from their effectiveness. The same crew that had calmly directed a battle that broke a Vorn armada was the crew that grew gardens, raised children, sang to themselves, and held the hands of frightened patients. It was not two different sides of one species. It was one whole. The capability for great care and the capability for great action, woven together so tightly they could not be separated. I had spent my life believing that fierce and gentle were opposites. The humans had quietly proven that they were not. They were two parts of the same thing. By the time we returned to the observation lounge to begin writing the report, my hands had stopped shaking. My breathing had slowed. The questions in my chest had not all been answered, but a few of the most important ones had been. I sat down across from Captain Brooks and picked up my cup of tea, which had grown cold during our walk. I did not mind. I drank it anyway. "I am ready," I told her. "Let us begin." The journey back to Threxlin Prime took 6 days. During those 6 days, I learned more about the universe than I had learned in my previous 50 cycles of life. Captain Brooks had agreed to escort our damaged fleet back to my home system, partly to provide protection in case the Vorn returned, and partly because the Conquered Council had requested her presence at the formal hearing that would follow. She was not eager to attend the hearing. She had told me, quietly, that her people preferred to do their work without too much public attention, but she understood that this time was different. Too much had been seen. Too many witnesses had survived. The truth could not be put back into a box. So we traveled together. My battered command ship, 12 other conquered vessels in various states of repair, and the dark human warship, moving in slow formation through the void. I spent much of those 6 days aboard the human ship. Captain Brooks had given me an open invitation to come and go as I pleased, and I took advantage of it. I needed to understand more. I needed to see more. I needed to ask questions that I could not formulate yet, and I knew that the only way to discover those questions was to keep walking through human spaces and watching how they lived. On the 2nd day, I met a young human boy named Henry. He was perhaps 8 Earth years old. He was the son of one of the engineers. He found me sitting alone in the recreation area, looking at the stars through a wide window, and he sat down next to me without being invited. "You are the alien coordinator," he said. He said it as a fact, not a question. "I am Coordinator Tenaris. I am Threxlin." "Are you sad?" The question surprised me. I thought about it before answering. "I am not sad, I am thinking." My grandfather thinks a lot too. He says thinking is just being sad about things you have not figured out yet. This was a strangely deep observation from a small child. I considered it. Your grandfather may be correct. I am thinking about things I have not figured out yet. Perhaps I am also a little sad about them. Henry nodded as if this confirmed something. Then he opened a small book he had been carrying and showed it to me. The pages were full of pictures he had drawn. There were pictures of stars and ships and creatures that I think were supposed to be different alien species, although I did not recognize most of them. He had drawn something that might have been a Threxlin, with too many limbs and a friendly smile. He had drawn it kindly. He had given it the largest eyes on the page, as if eyes were the most important thing about us. "That one is you," he said, pointing. "You drew this before you met me." My teacher said an alien coordinator was coming. I wanted to be ready. I wanted to know what you might look like, so I drew you the way I hoped you would look. Friendly, like somebody we could be friends with. I sat with the book in my hands for a long time. A child had drawn me as a friend before he had ever met me. He had imagined kindness into the picture before he knew anything about my species. "Henry," I said carefully, "this is a very good drawing. Thank you for showing it to me. You can have it if you want." "You would give me your drawing?" "Yes, I have other ones, and I want you to remember us when you go home, so you do not get lonely thinking about all the things you have not figured out yet." He tore the page out carefully and handed it to me. I folded it and placed it inside my uniform against my chest, where it would be safe. When I went back to my own ship that evening, I taped Henry's drawing to the wall of my private quarters. It is still there now, even though many cycles have passed since that day. On the third day, I had a long conversation with the human ship's chief engineer, a woman named Margaret. She was older than Captain Brooks, with white hair and very bright eyes. She had been in space for 30 Earth years. She knew the systems of the ship better than anyone else aboard, including, she joked, the captain herself. I asked her about the slipspace jump within the star system, the impossible jump. "It is not impossible," she said. "It is just very difficult and dangerous. We have lost ships testing it over the years. The mathematics requires precision down to the smallest measurable quantity. One mistake and the ship is just scattered across the void in pieces too small to see. We have learned slowly how to do it safely, but we still do not do it lightly. The captain only used it because the situation demanded it. Could your civilization share this technology with the conquered?" She thought about this for a moment. "I cannot answer that, coordinator. That is not a decision an engineer makes. That is a decision for governments and councils. But I can tell you my personal opinion if you would like." "Yes. Some technologies are gifts. Some technologies are burdens. The slipspace jump is a burden. It costs us crews and ships and constant research just to keep it working. If we gave it to a younger civilization, they would lose ships testing it. They would have to build the same kind of safety systems we have built. They would inherit our burden. I do not know if that is a kind gift to give to friends." I thought about this. It was a perspective I had not considered. There were technologies that should not simply be handed across, because the receiving species might not yet have the foundations to use them safely, like giving a starship to a child. "But there are other things," Margaret added, "that we could share more easily. Medicine, manufacturing techniques, agricultural methods, education systems. Things that make life better without requiring great risk to learn. We have many such things that we could give freely if we are asked." "Have you ever been asked?" She gave me a small, sad smile. "Coordinator, your Concord has not been very welcoming. We have been members for 11 cycles, and in that time, we have been asked for help a total of 9 times. 8 of those requests were for trade goods, and we provided them. The 9th was for help defending Kepler's reach. We answered that one too. We have never been asked to share our knowledge, our methods, our culture, or our technology in any meaningful way. We have been waiting to be asked. We have not pushed." This was hard to hear. It was true. The Conquered had treated the humans as a junior partner granted membership but not really embraced. We had taken their trade goods and ignored everything else they might offer. We had been polite but distant. We had not asked them about their culture, their knowledge, their dreams, or their fears. We had only asked about prices. "On behalf of my species," I told her, "I am sorry." She waved a hand gently. "Coordinator, you do not need to apologize. You are not the whole Conquered. And besides, things change. Today is a day of changes. There will be more days after this one." On the 4th day, I attended a small gathering in the ship's main dining hall. It was a memorial service for two members of the human crew who had been lost during the engagement at Kepler's Reach. I had not known about these losses. The humans had not mentioned them. They had not sought sympathy or recognition. But two crew members had given their lives during the battle. A communications specialist named Thomas had stayed at his post during a fire in his section, redirecting damage control teams until the fire was contained, and had not survived. A young pilot named Lucy had used her small craft to push a damaged life pod from one of our conquered ships out of the path of debris, and her small craft had not survived the collision. The captain spoke about each of them. So did their friends, their commanding officers, and members of their families who were aboard. I learned that Thomas had 3 children, all on the ship, and his wife had spoken at the service through tears that did not stop her from finishing what she had to say. I learned that Lucy had been engaged to be married, and her partner, a young man named Eric, had read a poem she had written for him only a month before. I sat in the back of the room and listened. Nobody had invited me. Nobody had sent me away either. I was simply allowed to be present, to witness, to share in something that was not really mine but had been made possible by something that was. After the service, I approached Captain Brooks. "Captain, why did you not tell me about these losses?" She looked at me with quiet eyes. "Because you would have felt that you owed us something. We do not want you to owe us. We want you to be our friends. Friends do not keep accounts of what is owed." "But 2 of your people have died, their families." "Yes, they knew the risks. They chose this work. We honor them by carrying on. That is what they would have wanted. You did not cause their deaths, Coordinator. The Vorn did. We do not blame you for the choices our enemies made." I did not know what to say. I had been raised in a culture where favors were carefully tracked and debts were always remembered. The idea of receiving help so significant, at such cost, with no expectation of repayment, was almost beyond my understanding. "Captain Brooks," I said quietly, "your people are very strange." She laughed. It was the first time I had heard her laugh. It was a warm sound. "Coordinator Tanaris, your people are very strange too. We are all strange to each other. That is what makes the universe interesting." On the 5th day, I had a private dinner with Captain Brooks in her quarters. She had invited me to share an Earth meal, prepared with ingredients that were carefully chosen to be safe for my biology. There was a soft white food made from grain. There was a colorful collection of cooked plants. There was a sweet drink made from fruits I had never tasted before. The meal was simple, but every part of it had been thought through with care. We talked for hours. Not about politics or weapons or the upcoming hearing. We talked about our families, about our home worlds, about the small things that made each of us who we were. She told me about her mother, who had been a teacher and had inspired her to join the military. She told me about her late father, who had been a fisherman and had taught her how to be patient. She told me about her wife, who was waiting for her back on Earth, and who wrote her letters every day even when communication was slow and the letters arrived in big bunches. I told her about my mate, Tessari. I told her about my 2 children, who were old enough now to have their own opinions about everything. I told her about my parents, who had wanted me to be a teacher like them, and had been quietly disappointed when I joined the conquered defense forces. I told her about my favorite garden in my home city, where I went to think when difficult decisions needed to be made. By the end of the meal, we were friends. Not allies, not partners, friends. 2 people from 2 species who had found that underneath all the strange surfaces we cared about most of the same things. Family, honor, the small daily joys, the fear of failing the people who depended on us. That night after I returned to my own quarters on my own ship, I could not sleep. I lay in my bunk and stared at the ceiling and thought about everything I had seen and heard during the journey. I thought about Henry's drawing, taped to my wall. I thought about Margaret's words about gifts and burdens. I thought about Lucy, who had given her life to push a life pod out of harm's way, and Thomas, who had stayed at his post during a fire. I thought about Captain Brooks's wife, writing daily letters that arrived in big bunches. I realized that during the entire battle at Kepler's Reach, I had been afraid of the wrong thing. I had been afraid that the humans were too dangerous. The truth was much more frightening than that. The truth was that they were too kind. A species with this much capability and this much restraint was something the universe had perhaps never seen before. They could have demanded payment for their help. They could have demanded political concessions. They could have used the moment to expand their influence in the conquered. They were doing none of these things. They were just helping because they believed it was the right thing to do. And they had been ready to do this for decades, perhaps centuries. They had built ships and trained crews and developed technologies, all in case a friend they had not yet met someday needed their help. What kind of species does that? What kind of species spends generations preparing to defend strangers? I did not know how to answer that question, but I knew that the answer would matter for the rest of my life, and probably for the rest of conquered history as well. I finally drifted into a thin, uneasy sleep, and I dreamed of Earth, a place I had never seen. In the dream, I walked through a forest where strange tall plants reached toward a sun that was the wrong color. There were small human children running through the forest, laughing, playing some kind of game I did not understand. They saw me and they were not afraid. One of them ran up to me and took my hand and led me toward a clearing where adults were preparing a meal over an open flame. They invited me to sit down. They gave me food. They asked me questions about my home and my family. They listened to my answers as if my answers mattered to them. When I woke up, the dream stayed with me. It did not feel like a dream about a place. It felt like a dream about a way of being. I had breakfast alone in my quarters that morning. I read through the report Captain Brooks and I had been writing together. We had decided to keep it simple. We would describe what had happened at Kepler's Reach. We would describe what the humans had revealed about themselves. We would offer our recommendations. We would not try to dictate the outcome. The council would have to decide what to do with the truth. The hardest part of the report was the section about human capabilities. We had agreed not to be specific. We would not list the technologies. We would not give numbers of ships. We would only say that the humans had revealed themselves to be more capable than the conquered had previously understood, and that they had chosen to use those capabilities only in defense of others. This was honest. It was also incomplete. The council would press for details. Some council members would insist on knowing exactly what the humans had. They would want to assess threats. They would want to plan responses. I had decided that I would not give them those details. Captain Brooks had earned my trust. I would not betray it. The humans had shown me their hand, but they had done so privately, and I would honor that privacy. The council could ask Captain Brooks herself if they wanted more information. She could answer or not as she chose. I knew this decision could end my career. I did not care. After what I had witnessed, my career was a small thing. In the late morning, my ship docked at the orbital station above Threxlin Prime. From there, a shuttle would take me to the council chambers on the surface. The human warship had already moved into a parking orbit a respectful distance away. Captain Brooks would arrive at the chambers separately, in a smaller diplomatic vessel. Before I left my ship, I took one last walk through its corridors. The damage from the battle was still visible everywhere, although the engineering crews had patched the worst of it. The ship would need months of repair work before it was fully fit for duty again. But it had survived. My crew had survived. And I knew, with a certainty I had not felt in many cycles, that we owed our survival to a species that had asked for nothing in return. Kelly's met me at the shuttle bay. He looked nervous. "Coordinator, are you ready?" "No, but I am going anyway." "Like before?" "Yes, like before. Some things you cannot prepare for. You can only walk toward them." He nodded. He understood, perhaps better than anyone else, what I had been through during these last 6 days. He had not been aboard the human ship. He had not met Henry or Margaret or shared a meal with Captain Brooks. But he had watched me come and go, and he had seen the changes in me. He knew that I was not the same coordinator who had given the order to grant tactical command 4 minutes long. I was someone slightly new, someone who had witnessed something that did not fit into the old shape of the universe. "Speak the truth in there," Kelly said. "Whatever happens, speak the truth." "I will." The shuttle lifted off and began its descent toward Threxlin Prime. Below me, my home world spread out in shades of green and gold. The cities I had known all my life, the forests where I had played as a child, the oceans my grandparents had taught me to fish. All of it had nearly been lost 6 days ago. All of it had been saved by a species I had once voted against. I thought about what I would say to the council. I thought about the eyes that would be watching me, the questions that would be asked, the decisions that would be made. I thought about Henry's drawing, still folded in my uniform. I thought about Captain Brooks's small, tired smile. I was ready. Or at least, I was as ready as I would ever be. On the 6th day, we arrived at Threxlin Prime. The Conquered Council was waiting. So was the future of the galaxy. I went to the hearing not knowing what I would say, but I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had felt. I knew what I now believed. I was about to learn whether the rest of the Conquered was ready to hear it. The Conquered Council chamber on Threxlin Prime is a vast circular room with seating for representatives from all 12 member species. The walls are made of pale stone quarried from each home world, one stone for each species, set into a single curved pattern that is meant to symbolize unity. Above the central floor, where speakers stand to give testimony, hangs a great glass dome that lets in natural light from the sky above. When I walked into the chamber that morning, every seat was filled. Word of what had happened at Kepler's Reach had traveled across the Conquered faster than any ship could. Every government had sent its highest representatives. The viewing galleries were packed with diplomats, journalists, military officers, and ordinary citizens who had managed to obtain passes. The room was completely silent as I entered, but it was the silence of held breath, not the silence of peace. I walked to the center of the floor. I stood on the speaker's stone, the small circular platform where witnesses gave their testimony to the council. I looked up at the curved rows of seats rising around me, 12 species, hundreds of representatives, all waiting to hear what I had to say. Captain Helen Brooks was seated in the visitor section, alone. She had been offered an honored guest position, but she had declined. She wanted to hear my testimony first, she had told me, before she gave her own. She wanted me to speak my truth without her presence influencing my words. The Speaker of the Council, an elderly Drenari named Valen Thurax, called the chamber to order. "Coordinator Vexral Tanaris," he said. His voice was amplified by the chamber acoustics so that every seat could hear clearly. "You are here to give official testimony regarding the events at the Kepler's Reach Jump Nexus. You will be asked questions. You will answer truthfully. Do you accept these terms?" "I do, Speaker." "Then please begin with your account of what occurred." I took a deep breath. I had practiced what I wanted to say 100 times during my journey, but now, standing before the entire Conquered, I found that my prepared words felt too small, too careful, too measured for what I had actually witnessed. I decided to speak from somewhere deeper than preparation. "Honored representatives of the Conquered," I began. 6 days ago, I was prepared to die. My fleet was being broken at Kepler's Reach. The Vorn hegemony was about to break through to 17 civilian worlds. 43 of our finest ships could not stop them. I had begun recording my final log. I had thought about my family. I had accepted that I would not return home. The chamber was completely still. And then a single human warship arrived. One ship. I had voted against admitting the humans to the Conquered 11 cycles ago. I had thought their species too young, too unpredictable, too strange to be trusted. When their captain, Helen Brooks, offered to take tactical command of my fleet for 4 minutes, I almost refused. Conquered protocol forbade it. My career would be at risk. Everything I had built would be in jeopardy. I paused. I granted her the command anyway, because we were going to die otherwise, because her ship was the only chance I could see. And in those 4 minutes, She did something I would not have believed possible if I had not seen it with my own eyes. I described the battle. I did not exaggerate. I did not minimize. I told them about the swarm that blinded the Vorn screening ships. I told them about the shaped void that removed the front of the Vorn flagship. I told them about the slipspace jump within the star system, an action our science had declared impossible. I told them about how the human ship had moved through the Vorn formation, disabling enemy vessels with surgical precision. I told them how the human captain had offered the surviving Vorn safe passage home, and how the Vorn collective mind had retreated for the first time in recorded history. The chamber listened. Nobody interrupted. Nobody coughed or shifted in their seat. They listened the way you listen when you know that what you are hearing will reshape your understanding of the world. When I finished describing the engagement, I went on to describe my time aboard the human ship. I told them about the families, the children, the gardens, the library. I told them about Henry's drawing of me, made by a child who had hoped I would be his friend before he ever met me. I told them about Margaret's words on the difference between gifts and burdens. I told them about the memorial service for Thomas and Lucy, and how their families had honored their service without ever asking the conquered for anything in return. Then I came to the hardest part of my testimony. Captain Brooks told me something, I said, during a private conversation aboard her ship. She told me that the vessel which broke a Vorn armada at Kepler's Reach is not a special ship. It is not their best. It is not even close to their best. It is, by human standards, a regular working vessel, a medium response ship. She told me that her people have many such ships. She told me that they have been preparing for a long time. The chamber stirred. Whispered conversations broke out in several sections at once. Speaker Thorax raised his hand for silence, and the chamber slowly quieted again. "Preparing for what?" he asked. I looked up at him. Then I looked across the chamber at Captain Brooks. She nodded slightly, giving me permission to share what she had shared with me. "Preparing," I said, "for the day when one of their friends would need help. They have built these ships and trained these crews and developed these technologies for one purpose only: to defend others, to answer when called, to be a friend when a friend is needed." A representative from the Brennikai delegation rose. He was a senior diplomat named S. Saurus Kelth. "Coordinator, are you suggesting that this human civilization has hidden military capabilities far beyond what they have officially declared to the conquered?" I am stating it directly. Yes, they have hidden capabilities. They have admitted as much. And you do not consider this a threat to conquered security? I had been waiting for this question. I had thought about my answer for 6 days. Honored representative. The humans had these capabilities 6 days ago. They had them 11 cycles ago when they joined the conquered. They have had them in some form for a long time. During all those years, they have not used these capabilities against any conquered member. They have not threatened anyone. They have not demanded anything. They have only used them when finally pressed to save us. 17 civilian worlds are still standing today because of those hidden capabilities. If they had wanted to be a threat to us, they would have been one already. They are not. They have chosen to be friends. The question before this council is not whether to fear them. The question is whether to deserve them. The chamber went still again. The phrase had landed harder than I had expected. A representative from the Kothari delegation rose next. Her name was Lyra Vesk, and she was famous for her sharp questions. "Coordinator, did the human captain give you any indication of the size of their fleet, any numbers, any specifics?" She did not. "Did you ask?" "I did." She declined to answer. I did not press her. "Why not?" I looked at her steadily. Because she had earned my trust by then, honored representative, and because the answer was not mine to demand. It was hers to share in her own time on her own terms. "You are aware that you may be questioned about this decision under formal procedure." "I am aware. I will accept whatever consequences result from my decisions. But I will not break the trust of someone who saved 17 civilian worlds." There was a long silence. Then, from the visitor section, Captain Brooks rose to her feet. "Speaker Thorax," she said, her voice clear in the chamber, "may I address the council briefly?" The speaker considered, then he nodded. "You may, Captain Brooks, please come to the floor." She walked down the steps and crossed to the speaker's stone. I stepped back to give her room. She stood next to me, looked up at the curved rows of seats, and spoke without notes. "Honored representatives of the conquered, my name is Helen Brooks. I am a captain in the Earth Defense Service. Coordinator Tanaris has spoken truthfully today. Everything he has said is accurate. I would now like to give your council the answer to the question Representative Vesk just asked." The chamber leaned forward, almost as one body. "My people have many ships. We have many crews. We have technologies that we have not yet shared with the conquered. The exact numbers and specifications are not important right now. What is important is what we choose to do with them." She paused. She looked around the chamber slowly, meeting eyes across multiple species. "For decades, we have hidden much of what we are. We did this because we did not want to frighten you. We did not want to be seen as a threat. We wanted to fit quietly into your conquered and earn your trust over time. We thought this was the kind thing to do. We were wrong. The kind thing we have realized would have been to be honest from the beginning. Hidden truths grow into shadows that no one trusts. Today, we are stepping out of that shadow. We are telling you who we are. We are asking you to know us as we really are, not as the small junior partner we have pretended to be." She paused again. "We are not your enemies. We have never been your enemies. We do not wish to lead the conquered. We do not wish to dominate your governments. We do not wish to claim your worlds. What we wish, what we have always wished, is to be your friends. Real friends. The kind of friends who can be honest with each other, who can share both gifts and burdens, who can stand together when difficult days come. We have been preparing for those difficult days because we knew they would come. We did not wish to be unprepared when one of you called for help. We did not wish to be useless in a moment of need." She turned slightly so she could see Speaker Thorax. "The conquered has a choice to make. You can fear us. You can vote to expel us. You can demand that we surrender our technologies and dismantle our ships. We will not resist. If that is what the conquered wishes, we will leave quietly and return to our home systems. We will not threaten you. We will not seek revenge. We will simply go." A murmur ran through the chamber. "Or," she continued, "you can welcome us, not as a junior partner but as a full and honest member. You can ask us to share what we have. You can let us help you build your defenses, improve your medicines, expand your knowledge. You can let us know you and let us be known to you fully and truly. The choice is yours. We will accept whatever you decide, but we will not hide anymore. The hiding is over." She stepped back. The chamber was completely silent. I do not know how long the silence lasted. It felt like a very long time. Perhaps it was only a few moments. Then Speaker Thorax stood. His face was grave, but his eyes were thoughtful. "Captain Brooks, Coordinator Tanaris, thank you both for your testimony today. The Council will now retire to consider what we have heard. We will reconvene in 3 days to render our decision." 3 days. 3 days that would shape the future of the galaxy. I walked out of the chamber with Captain Brooks at my side. Neither of us spoke as we made our way through the great corridors of the Council building. There was nothing to say. We had done what we could. The decision was now in other hands. The 3 days passed slowly. I spent them at home with Tessari and our children, who held me very tightly when I first walked through the door. I told them about the battle. I told them about Henry. I showed them the drawing which I had brought with me. My youngest looked at it for a long time and then asked if she could draw a picture for Henry in return. I told her yes. She spent the next 2 days working on it, very carefully, very seriously. She drew our family standing in our garden on Threxlin Prime, with the door open in welcome. On the 3rd day, the Council reconvened. The chamber was, if anything, more crowded than before. Word had spread across every member species. Every world was watching, listening, waiting. Speaker Thorax rose to read the decision. "After careful consideration," he said, "the Conquered Council has reached a unanimous decision. The human civilization, having proven both their capabilities and their character at Kepler's reach, is hereby elevated from probationary membership to full and equal membership in the conquered. All restrictions on human trade, travel, and political participation are lifted immediately. Furthermore, the Council formally requests that the human civilization share, at their own pace and on their own terms, such knowledge and technologies as they wish to share with their fellow members. We extend our deepest thanks for the protection of Kepler's reach. We extend our deepest apologies for the years of unwarranted suspicion. We extend our hand in true friendship, offered freely and without conditions. The chamber erupted in applause. It was not the formal applause of political agreement. It was the warm, sustained, almost grateful applause of people who knew they had just done something right. I looked across at Captain Brooks. She was smiling, but her eyes were wet. She had not expected this. She had been prepared for the worst. Instead, she had received something better than she had ever hoped for. That was many cycles ago now. The conquered today is not the conquered I grew up in. The humans are everywhere. They run schools on a dozen worlds, teaching subjects we did not know we needed to learn. Their medicines have eliminated 3 diseases that used to claim conquered lives every year. Their ships escort our trade routes through dangerous regions. Their engineers help build our cities. Their families live among ours and our families live among theirs. We have learned each other's languages. We have shared each other's meals. We have buried each other's dead and celebrated each other's births. I have visited Earth twice. It is exactly as Captain Brooks described it, a beautiful, dangerous, wonderful world. The forests are full of strange tall plants that reach toward a sun that is the wrong color. There are children there who run and laugh and play games I do not understand. They are not afraid of me. They take my hand and lead me to clearings where adults are preparing meals over open flames. They invite me to sit. They give me food. They listen to my answers, as if my answers matter to them. It is not a dream, it is a real place. On my second visit, I traveled to a small coastal town where Captain Brooks had retired with her wife. She had stepped down from active service 2 cycles after the events at Kepler's reach. She was older now, with gray streaks in her dark hair, but her eyes were the same calm, steady eyes I remembered. She welcomed me into her home as if I had always been part of her family. She introduced me to her wife, a kind, quiet woman named Beatrice, who made us a meal in the same careful way Helen had once prepared a meal for me on her ship. We sat on their porch in the evening, watching the sun set over the water. Helen did not talk much about the battle anymore. She talked about her garden, about the boats in the harbor, about the small daily things that made her life full. I understood. The battle had been a single afternoon in a long life. The life itself was what mattered. Before I left, she gave me a small framed photograph of her crew, taken on the day after Kepler's reach, all of them gathered in the dining hall, smiling at the camera. Henry was in the picture, an 8-year-old boy standing in front, holding up his book of drawings. I took the photograph home and hung it on my wall, next to his original drawing of me. Henry is grown now. He is an engineer on a human research vessel. He sends me letters every cycle. I write back. He reminds me of his promise to keep me from getting lonely thinking about all the things I have not figured out yet. He has kept his promise. I am old now. My time as coordinator ended many cycles ago. I spend my days in my garden on Threxland Prime, watching the seasons change and remembering all the things I have seen. My grandchildren visit often. They ask me to tell them about the battle at Kepler's reach. About the day a single human warship arrived and the battle changed in seconds. I tell them the story. I always tell it the same way. I tell them about a young captain with shaking hands who commanded a ship that did the impossible. I tell them about the 17 worlds that were saved. I tell them about a boy named Henry who drew a picture before he ever met me, hoping I would be a friend. And I always end the story the same way. I tell them that the universe is not cold, and the stars are not empty, and we are not alone. I tell them that somewhere out there, on a beautiful, dangerous world we now call home, There are people who, long before they knew us, were already preparing to defend us. I tell them that those people are our friends. I tell them that we said yes. And I tell them that yes was the most important word I ever spoke in my life.